Lake Herman Road was just a sleepy little road, two-lane road. It was a shortcut from Vallejo to the Benicia area, the Benicia Township. It was not very well traveled. It was not lit at all. Of course, there were no street lights. The turnout area where the crimes were committed was kind of a little lover's lane. People would stop there, you know, and kids knew that. The Benicia High School kids knew that. You know, Hogan High, the Vallejo High School kids all knew that that transaction was there, I mean, back and forth on that road. But you did not have a whole lot of traffic. If there was any traffic in the evening, it was teenagers or somebody just getting off work late and coming back over to Benicia. The population was probably around 5,000. It was a sleepy little community, middle class. Crime rate was very, very low per population, almost nil. Major crime at that time within the city would be a bar fight, a stolen car, minor thefts, some family disturbances. There were not any murders prior to that for at least 5 or 6 years.
I was the first officer. I was on patrol that night. My partner was sick. He couldn't make it. And Wayne Waterman was a new kid on the job. He was working in jail. We all worked at jail first. And he asked if he could ride with me. I said, sure, I'm glad to have him. We got a call from the sergeant that a man from Benicia who fishes at Lake Berryessa wasn't home. And it was around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. He asked us to look down Lake Herman Road and see if his truck was there. It was a blue truck. And just as we turned on Lake Herman Road, we had a call to go to the Hells Angels pad on Warren Street. We were there about, 30, 40 minutes. When we got back in the car, we were told we had a double 187 on Lake Herman Road.
During that night, we had served a search warrant at what we called the cottage at Lake Herman, which was owned by the city of Benicia, a narcotic search warrant, my partner and I. And we confiscated about 1.5 pounds of marijuana, which, you know, in the 1960s, that was a big drug bust. Today, it wouldn't get very high on the Richter scale. We had left, we're heading back to the police department to put the marijuana into evidence, and as we drove by, we did not observe or see anybody in that area because it's a turn there and your headlights shine right in there as you go by. As we're pulling into the lot in the police department, we heard the Benicia Police Department dispatcher put out a call of possible shooting and victims on Lake Herman Road and described the location. My partner and I turned around at that time and responded to the call. When we got there, there was already a marked police unit from Benicia, and one of our police sergeants was on scene at that time.
The car was heading east near a place where they had a pumping station or something down below. Because I remember we used to see the fellow check it out every night.
It was a Rambler, a two-tone Rambler. We first saw the first victim, the male, who was lying outside of the passenger door of the vehicle. It appeared that he had a gunshot wound above the left ear. He appeared, or was actually breathing. It was a fairly cold night. It was late on a December night, and you could actually see his breath. I think that was just because his respiratory system was still intact to some extent. His brain hadn't actually shut down yet, which shut him down. We never had too many murders. We solved them all, but there was just a few. But this one, and there was a gal who lived in a woman who lived in a house about a mile up, going towards Vallejo, and she saw the Benicia Police Department, and she told them about it, and they were there first on the scene. Of course, the sheriff's office was called because it is their jurisdiction, and Solano County Sheriff's Office responded and actually handled the investigation. We stood around to assist their deputies and to keep the press and other people away as they worked the crime scene.
We contacted the office, told them to have Sergeant Les Lundblad come. He was in charge. I was a patrolman at that time.
The boy was an Eagle Scout. The girl was on her first date, and there's no record of any misbehavior on either one of them.
Why did this happen?
It was a senseless murder, I believe.
He told me, he says, follow the ambulance down and see if you can get any information, you know. That's where I found out about the ring. I noticed he had it like this, holding it like that, holding it like somebody was trying to take it from him. And the nurse, she said he died before he came in the hospital.
Looked to the rear of the vehicle and saw the female victim approximately 29 to 30 feet, face down, and had been shot multiple times.
She was shot full of holes. I forget how many. We got several shells from her where she was shot in the back.
The female victim had bled out, and it was obvious without even taking a pulse, which I did do. She was expired at the scene. I mean, she just completely, there was a lot of blood, and she completely just bled out, it appeared. Where the female victim was laying, there was expended casings from a .22, and there was also casings, I believe, on the right side of the vehicle. There was one round that was fired through the right rear window, and we tried to figure out, was that a warning shot to get the victims out of the car? But I don't think that was ever decided, although that round did not, to the best of my recollection, did not hit the male victim, that it went into the headliner of the vehicle.
Possibly they were ordered out of the car by the responsible, and the boy was shot right at the side of the car, and the girl apparently tried to run, and she was shot and found 28 feet further on.
There was one bullet hole that penetrated one of the windows of the car. Was this a stray bullet, or was this one of the bullets that hit the victim and went on through?
This could be a stray bullet or a warning bullet of some sort. We can't connect it with the bodies, but it's the same type of shell.
So I came back to the scene. Les was there. We went over everything, and that was it for that day. We worked till about 4 o'clock in the morning, checking every place and that, and all the bullets we could find and that. Then the next morning I got a call and they told me I was going to be an investigator on it.
It wasn't handled as you would handle it today. Because I don't think there was the experience there to actually handle it that way. And you got to realize the first concern was the male victim. Is he still alive? Let's get him, let's save a life here. Then, of course, they marked the bodies, and I'm sure they parked the patrol cars, and they walked around and looked and picked up the empty casings and so on and so forth. But under today's circumstances, because of the technology we have today that we didn't have then, they would have worked that crime scene for 24 hours. I mean, they would have taken earth samples, they would have looked for fiber, you would have looked for follic hairs, any hair. I mean, it would have been a lot more in depth just because they had the technology that today that they did not have in those days.
You know, in that half hour, we counted there were people around that area except for 6 minutes. And during that 6 minutes, that's when it all happened.
We felt that we were probably only minutes from the actual crime scene when it happened. And again, to the best of my recollection, we did not pass any other vehicular traffic, and I'm pretty sure of that because that was one of the things that we told the sheriff's office. We did not see any other vehicles coming our way. Now, we take a bit of a shortcut. So what could have happened is that depending where a vehicle turned onto Lake Herman Road, if it came from behind us from Vallejo, we would not have seen them. Our feeling at that time is that the person came, or persons came from the Vallejo area and did not come from the Benicia area. Once the Blue Rock Springs, the Vallejo case, had occurred, I think that it really set into the residents of Benicia, at least, and Vallejo also, that we've got some kind of a crazed, and that's the term they were using at that time, crazed killer out there. People couldn't figure out, what is he or she doing? What is this all about? What's the motive? And, you know, most homicides, in my experience, you know, if you can find the motive, you're going to find the responsible. And I think, you know, I've been out of law enforcement for a few years, but I think that the FBI statistics are still somewhere in the high 80s, that most victims know their assailant. But when you have a random killing or killings without a motive, without any method of operation, and the method of operation were different between the two, theoretically, except it was a couple, it really starts to set in and really panic, and then you start thinking of, you know, and again, what they were talking about is a crazed killer, a madman, or mad person that was out there just taking human life.
Why wasn't the Zodiac caught?
Beats the heck out of me. I don't know, we could never nail down anybody on it.
I'm not sure that if we had, you know, like I said, the science we have today, that he'd be able to beat that. I really think if we had, you know, and again, it's like putting the cart before the horse, but if we could take what we have today and go back then, I think that he, you know, would have been arrested, period. But again, everything's academic at this point.
Back at that time, Blue Rock Springs, that was more or less a rural area. Vallejo had not expanded its city limits out that far yet, so it was a rather rural area.
On the weekends especially, there would be large crowds of people out there. They'd barbecue. At night, it really got dark. There were some street lights out there, but only a couple of them. It was kind of out in the boondocks. And kids would use it parentally as a lover's lane. You could drive your patrol car by there, and there'd be 4 or 5 cars out there. Many times people listen to the radio and doing whatever else they do in lover's lane.
It was July 4th, a holiday, and my partner and I, John Lynch, who was also a detective sergeant, he was the senior of our team. We worked a late shift, like 3 to midnight, something like that, and we were driving around. I was driving the plainclothes car. We were plainclothes detectives, and we were down. I think down around the downtown area in Vallejo, the old part of town, and it was close to midnight, and we heard reports of a possible shooting at Blue Rock Springs Park. And over the radio, they dispatched a patrol car, and so I said, you know, I'm the younger by far of the two of us. So I told John, I said, why don't you want to head out there? And he says, no, it's probably just firecrackers or something.
At 12:10, the first call I received was from a young white woman, I would say in her late teens, 16, 17, 18, somewhere around there. And she was really agitated, excited, or whatever. And she reported that there were kids being shot at Blue Rock Springs.
So since I was driving, I kind of started meandering that direction. And a few minutes later, we got, I believe, another report of shots fired again at Blue Rock Springs. And the officer, I think it was Dick Hoffman, patrol officer, got there first and said he had a shooting, 2 people involved. So then, obviously, I put it in high gear and took off, and we got out there pretty quickly.
I was working as a patrol officer in the juvenile division. That was a plainclothes assignment. Now, I had just been out to Blue Rock Springs a half hour or so before that and checked the area and found it closed. My purpose out there was to make sure there were no teenagers hanging out, drinking, fighting, whatever. The park was closed. And there was no activity out there when I passed through a half hour or so ahead of that time.
So I took the call and I gave it to the dispatcher, And I remember her saying, I don't know who I'm going to send. I don't have anybody free.
And I wasn't far away, so I turned around and went back out there. Told dispatch that I was going to go out there to check on that report.
Hoffman was at the scene. We pulled in the parking lot, and I saw this little, I think it was a 1963 light brown Corvair. It had its headlights on. The passenger door was open, and there was a male person laying on the ground. And Hoffman was ministering to him.
And I got up close, and with my flashlight, I looked down there, and there was a young guy down there laying on his back. Obviously had been shot. He was reaching up towards me or the flashlight I was holding, kind of gurgling, obviously in pain. From him, I looked over in the front seat of the car and saw a young girl sitting behind the steering wheel of the car. She'd been shot too. Blood all over the front in the car.
And I asked Hoffman, what you got here? And he says, I've got the driver in there, the girl, she's been shot. And this guy, later identified as Michael Mageau, was laying on the ground, and he'd just been shot to pieces. He had a bullet, I think, went through his neck and came out of his cheek. I got up and walked around to the driver's door, and the window was down, and the girl, later identified as Darlene Farron, she had her eyes, slitted open a little bit. And I could see she was breathing, and I asked her if she could tell me what happened. And she kind of tried mumbling something. I got up real close, and I never could distinguish any actual words.
I checked her pulse, carotid artery pulse. I found nothing. Ambulance came.
They loaded Mageau up first, and then got Darlene out of the car. And one of the things I did when they lifted Mageau up, we had marked, I think Hoffman had outlined his body with a crayon. And so I was shining the light down there. For whatever reason, I saw there was a bullet slug underneath where Mageau had been lying. And I picked it up, and it looked like a 9mm parabellum bullet, they call it.
I thought it kind of strange when they undressed that man. He was wearing a lot of clothes. He had several pairs of pants on and some sweaters and long sleeve shirt, and that weather was hot that night out there. I don't know why he was dressed so hot.
I was real skinny. I was still skinny, but back in 1969, I was so skinny that I had to wear 2 pairs of pants, so it was so thin, I was wearing 2 pairs of pants to cover up my thinness, and she knew it, but she used to joke about it. So why are you wearing so many pants? I'm thin,
I found Darlene's purse in the back seat and got her identification out, and there was blood all over the seat. And then I walked around, and Mageau's wallet was up on, I think, the right rear fender of the car, and I later learned that Hoffman had gotten it out and had laid it up there. So I took that in the purse, and those things were all put into evidence. When the ambulance left, we told Hoffman to ride in the ambulance and keep trying to get a statement.
Both of them were put in the ambulance, and I rode the ambulance with them to Kaiser Hospital in Vallejo.
Did you try talking to her?
There's no talking to her. I was there to record anything that would have been said, but I couldn't speak with her. There was an ambulance attendant giving her CPR during the ride to the hospital. And of course her shirt or sweater, whatever she was wearing, was off. And each time that ambulance attendant blew air into her chest, there was a little piece of material from her bra that I could see fluttered with every breath he blew into that girl. This piece of material would flutter on the side. I could see that. There was no talking to that girl.
You knew her before the attack, right?
I never laid eyes on her.
You never laid eyes on her before the attack?
No. I'd heard that she was a waitress at an all-night restaurant in Vallejo, but I didn't know the girl at all. Gray Smith wrote a book about the Zodiac, and he mentioned in his book that I was at Darlene and her husband's house on a house painting party prior to her death, and I don't know anything about that. It wasn't me. But that's what he says in his book.
Darlene was my girlfriend at the time, and I was dating her, and we planned to get married. She was already married, and Everybody knew her husband worked at the restaurant as a cook. His name was Steve. Steve was a real nice guy, a good friend of mine, but he knew that we were dating, but she also dated my twin brother, Steve. My identical twin brother, Steve, she also dated him. And we had a big fight. Me and Steve had a big fight about that. Because I pretended I was Warren Beatty, the actor. And I told her, I said, I'm Warren Beatty, the actor, and this is my brother. He just shot somebody. And she said, oh, that's cool. I'll take care of you guys. She did say that. Yeah. I thought, I told Steve, how about that? Yeah. So she, make a long story short, she, it started out as a joking thing, but it's too bad she ended up losing her life behind it. You know, seriously, it's too bad she got murdered as a result of our meeting. I went to my house, and she picked me up at my house, and we were going to go out that night. We couldn't see each other the next day, so we decided to see each other that night, after midnight. To have a lover's lane type thing, kiss and talk and hold each other's hands.
Is that what Blue Rock Springs was used?
Yeah, it was a lover's lane park for young people. I was 19 at the time. Now I'm 57, but I was 19 at the time. She was 22. We were chased by this guy, chased by him from a restaurant. He was chasing us, and I told her to pull off at the park. And he chased me all night long at the restaurant. Chased us to a coffee shop named Paul's, or whatever it was called, and then he chased us all the way to the park, and then that's where I ended up in Blue Rock Springs Park. I thought he drove away, but he came back later on and shot us.
Michael Mageau was the only one that was of the two that was able to talk to us at all, and he gave just a very brief description. He thought, I believe he told Hoffman he thought it was a car like it was Darlene Ferrin's car, the Corvair, and he said he thought a car pulled up a few feet away from them, just a couple of minutes before the shooting. Wasn't sure if it was the same car.
It was like a brown Renault car, small combat car. But it could have been a Cadillac too. I'm not really sure. I can't really remember.
They said this car pulled up, and he asked Darlene, do you know who that is? And she said something like, never mind.
She told him he was a friend of hers and not to worry about it. He was just jealous. That's all she said about it. He was just jealous. She never mentioned his name, but she said something about Richard. His name was Richard. I kept name Richard. And I think that was his name. She referred to him as Richard, the Zodiac killer guy. And she said he really had a mean temper, and that if he ever found out, he would kill her. He would kill her. As she mentioned, she said those words, he would kill me if he ever knew I was talking to you about that. She told me that.
And then the car left, and then just very shortly after that, this car pulled up behind their car with the headlights on, and he thinks it might have been the same car, but he didn't see the car to be able to tell.
I told her we were on the run. We were literally on the run, This guy was chasing us big time.
I don't think you told the police that night that you'd been chased, though.
No, I didn't. I left that out. I don't know why, but I left that out. I forgot about it or something.
But you're sure now that you...
I'm sure that happened, yeah.
I'm not sure if he told Hoffman before we got there that when he was shot, that he was able to get out of the car and fell down on the ground, and as he lay on the ground, he saw the assailant's car drive away back toward the city of Vallejo at a high rate of speed.
He drove off quietly. He didn't feel out. He drove real quietly in his car and quietly drove out. You could barely hear the engine. He drove out.
I believe he said that it looked like it might have been that same car that pulled up, next to them just a few minutes before the actual shooting, but I can't be positive about that.
We thought he just left and he wasn't going to bother us anymore, but he came back and got out of his car. He had a blinding light. He had a big beamer just blinded my eyes, right in my eyes. I thought it was a police with a flashlight, but it wasn't a police. It was him, the Zodiac killer. I thought it was a policeman. That's why I wrote it in the window. I wrote it on the window, because I was so I could have my ID, and that's when he started shooting. And he thought he hit me, but I looked down, I saw blood spurting out of my mouth, and I knew I had been shot. I asked the policeman, why'd you hit me? And I realized I had been shot. It wasn't a policeman. That's the first time I realized it wasn't a policeman. It was a killer. I got shot 5 times. Shot in the face, went through my right ear, went through my tongue and my jaw, and came out here and went into her. A bullet went into her and killed her. And shoulder, elbow, my side, and twice my left leg. It lasted a long time because he shot me and shot me and shot me and shot me and shot me. It took forever, man, for me. It might have been a silencer. Might have had a silencer, but I don't know. Just, I didn't really hear a big bang like a gun, 9 millimeter make, but I heard a snapping sound like a firecracker. So I think to me, I thought he had a silencer because I didn't hear I could hear, but it wasn't a loud booming bang. It was just like a pop, and a crack, like pow, 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 crack, crack, crack. That's what a shot sounded like, crack, like a firecracker gun or a BB gun,
When we got there, the headlights and taillights were on, and I believe the radio, the ignition was turned to the accessory position, and the radio was on and playing low. I did later learn that Michael thinks that Darlene flashed the lights on and off the headlights trying to attract attention. He says he's not sure if he asked her to do that or if she did it on her own, but that because he said when Michael told me later when they pulled into the parking lot, she turned the lights off but had the radio on, and apparently if she was flashing the lights for attention, she ended up leaving the headlights on because they were on when we got there. But Michael told me that when they pulled in, she turned the headlights off.
When he came up and shot me, I did have an idea what he looked like. He looked like a tall white guy, about 6 feet tall, jet black hair, curly hair, and he looked like an average-looking person, but he wasn't ugly, he wasn't handsome, just an average, nondescript guy, a plain guy, but he had tall, dark, and he may have worn glasses like yours or mine, or reading glasses, He may have had glasses. I recall he did have glasses on, as I recall. He did have glasses. I remember that. He definitely had glasses on. The gunshot flew in the backseat of the car. I was upside down. My left leg was around my shoulder. My arm was around. I was straightening myself with my own arm. I opened the back door to get out, and I fell out of the ground. And she was already dead.
So how long was it before the police showed up?
About 9 hours. Literally, the time I was shot, I was in the blood for like 4 hours. I was on the ground for 4 hours. July 4, 1969, everybody was having fun and games, and people came by and saw me there, wouldn't even call the cops, and I stood there for 4 hours. People would like, "Are you all right, Mr. No, I'm not all right." They ran screaming. So yeah, it was a horrible night for me. It was. Because she died, it wasn't just me. It was I knew she was dead. Well, I was going to marry her. I was really going to marry her, so I took it really hard that she died. Because I felt like I should have saved her, because I was there to protect her, and I couldn't protect her. I always regret the fact that she got killed. I was still partly responsible for it, Physically, I'm fine. Physically, I feel fine, but mentally, the scars, emotionally, the scars are still there. I'd feel really good if he was caught. I'd feel really good. Put an end to that, put that guy in death row or something. It just made me feel closure with that. I feel better because they solved the murder case against Darlene, who was a nice, innocent, good person. Innocent victim of circumstance. People put her down and say she was a whore or whatever. She wasn't. She was a very nice human being. And I did love her, and I still love her. I always love her, And she got murdered needlessly. She was 22 years old. I was 19. But I had a long, good life after that shooting, but she got killed that day. I can't forget that. There's a black mark on my life. I'd like to get closure for her case and her family who suffered, never knowing who murdered their daughter, Darlene's parent.
I think I could see the color. She had blue eyes. Her eyes were, partially opened, but I could tell she was breathing, and she responded to me when I asked her, "Can you tell me what happened?" She was trying to say something, but she was just so gone at that time that just, I got my ear right up next to her mouth, and just nothing. I couldn't make anything out. After the shooting at Blue Rock Springs Park, the Zodiac, the shooter, apparently drove back into Vallejo and drove down a street called Tuolumne Street, and at that time there was a Union 76 gas station that was closed, at the time. There's a public phone booth there, and he called the Whale Police Department and claimed responsibility.
Then the next call I got was about 12:40. And that's the call that I received from the man who was subsequently called Zodiac. He spoke in a monotone. It's like he had rehearsed it or was reading what he was saying. He had a very non-emotional voice. You know, his first words were, "I want to report a double murder. If you'll go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park." And I said, "Yes, sir, we have a report of a shooting in that area. I still need to get your name and your location." And he said, "You'll find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. And I also killed those kids last year." I got a very taunting, scary type, creepy feeling from the call. And when he got to the end of his statement, it's hard for me to duplicate, but instead of just saying, "If you read my report, it means nothing," but if you hear, you know, if you could have heard, I can't explain it as well as I still hear it. You know, it was from somebody who was really out there. But his voice really changed when he came to goodbye. And it wasn't just goodbye. Now it may sound a little silly to people. It didn't to me at the time. But he said something like, "Goodbye." And he hangs up. And I'm just kind of sitting there thinking, oh my God.
I ran into Cecilia at the cafeteria. It's a fairly small school and campus. Most of the meals are taken on campus. And I ran into her, probably a couple, 300 people in the cafeteria, and I happened to run into her. She came to me, I don't remember which, and we were still good friends. We dated a couple years before. And
What was it?
Pacific Union College. And we decided to go into San Francisco. We'd been in there many times, and when we went to school there together. She was going, I think, to UC Riverside at the time, and was just coming up to visit friends. So we went down to St. Helena, and I think we looked in a rummage sale or something. We got distracted. We didn't make it all the way out of town, and then when we looked at the clock, it was clear that we were not going to make it to the city and back. I had some responsibilities that evening that I had to be back for. So we decided instead to take the loop up to Lake Berryessa.
There's a lot of activity up at Berryessa during the summer months, but after Labor Day, when all the kids go back to school, it kind of quiets down. And this was September 27th, probably 3.5 weeks after Labor Day. So it was a very, very quiet Saturday evening up there. The weather was nice. Napa's kind of a secluded community. We're bordered on both sides by major highways, Highway 80 to our east and Highway 101 to our west. And so we don't get a lot of the traffic coming through Napa that some of the other cities do. So we have a relatively low crime rate. We can sometimes go several years without a homicide. I think that particular year we had 5 or 6, which is unusual.
It was a Saturday, late in the afternoon, around 6:15. I was on patrol. The dispatcher notified me by radio that he had received a report of a double stabbing at Lake Berryessa, and I was to respond. So I notified my partner, who was Deputy Ray Land, at the time was in St. Helena. I was in Napa on the northeast side of town. We both began to proceed to Lake Berryessa.
The shoreline at that spot was a little on the steep side so that I could lay on my back and pretty much see out across the lake. She was laying somewhat diagonally with her hands on my chest, and we were probably about 12 inches our faces apart, and we were talking, and I noticed that she was becoming distracted. She said, "There's a man over there." And I assumed, since we're out on a peninsula and there was a spit of water between where we were and the next area over. It's kind of hard to describe. With a reservoir, you have more peninsulas and irregular shoreline because you're filling up a ravine, if you will. Where a lake, if it's been there a long time, it's pretty much rounded around the edge. This wasn't that old a reservoir, and so as a consequence, you had a very irregular shoreline. And we're at one area, then there was water in between, then there was another area, another place where people could go. And I thought they were on the other side of the water.
And everybody who's not a tree, can we clear out this way?
See, if that's a tree, that's a tree, that's a tree. And that's the one he probably was behind. We're a little closer, but remember we talked about the fact that this is all eroded. So that was the closest tree. There was a tree there. That puts me probably about in here, okay? And I'm facing this way, laying on my back. And Cecilia is on her stomach facing this way, actually facing kind of like this. So her head's facing that way. And we're talking. And when she says, "I see a man over there," what I'm thinking is, if you look to the left of her, you can see those trees on that hill. That would be another picnic area. So seeing someone on that hill, would be of interest, but not of any great urgency. But seeing someone as close as her would obviously be some cause for concern. And so I'm continuing to talk, and then she says, "He went behind a tree." And so he goes behind the tree where she is. And again, I'm thinking behind those trees over there. So then when she says, "Oh, he's got a gun," he's walking this direction. And I turn around, and from there to here, he's probably made it to about here. So we're about half the distance between the tree and me. And so that was my first running into him, and it was really somewhat of a surprise that he was that close, because again, I was looking at the other area. I'll tell you another thing that probably made me think that it was somebody over there. It wasn't an improved park site. There wasn't regular established bathrooms, so if you had to use the restroom, you just kind of get out of eye shot of whoever you were with, or go behind a tree or something like that. So when she says he went behind a tree, that actually validated what I thought was happening on the 1,000 feet away, that someone was actually relieving themselves behind a tree, and I commented. She still wasn't paying attention, which to me was kind of distracting, because why should you worry if someone that far away was doing whatever they're doing? And then her eyes got wide and she says, "Oh my God, he's got a..." And I turn around and I'm faced with this man, not running, but walking briskly toward me with a gun in his hand, wearing a hood, black hood. It comes down in the front, across his chest and back up, like an overlay or a dicky. I'm assuming it was on the back as well, although I don't remember seeing it on the back. And on the front was about a 4-inch across circle with crosshairs, and it looked like it was made with a machine or with some degree of care. It wasn't just scrawled on with white paint. It was proportional. But at the time it really didn't strike me, because it was just something that a person was putting over themselves so that they wouldn't be seen. I mean, it could have come from a costume shop or a novelty store. The symbolism on it really didn't mean anything. He didn't identify himself as being the Zodiac. In fact, as soon as I get up, he goes, "Okay, hold on, everybody. Nothing to be afraid of. All I want is your money, and I need your car. If everybody stays cool, nobody's going to get hurt." And I believed him.
The only thing to me, this came out since then, but he told me at that time that he had killed a guard getting out of a prison, and so I did take him as a killer. To me, a killer isn't a normal person, so I assumed at the time that something was wrong. But as far as a psychopath or any other aberration, I really didn't realize at the moment. I wasn't concerned, because I was cooperating with him, and I expected that he would cooperate with me. And I tried to be as accommodating under the circumstances as possible to save the girl. Any harm, he wanted our money. And I actually laughed at the moment because I told him, I said, I've only got 75 cents in my pocket. And I said, you're welcome to have it. But if you need help, I'm sure I can give you help otherwise. And I asked him what his problem was. And he mentioned that he was a convict trying to get to Mexico and needed money and transportation. And I offered him assistance. I told him what I was doing in school, and that if I could be of any assistance whatsoever, I offered him my phone number, anything like this. And this just isn't what he wanted. He said he wanted money. And I was really sorry. I said, you got to check if I'd really like to help you, if you'd be willing to accept help. He said, well, what I need right now is to get you tied up.
He pulled some cuts of 3-foot lengths of clothesline. It's actually plastic. It's the kind that's hollow in the center. And he handed those to Cecilia and asked her to tie me up.
Of course, she was real nervous and tied me rather loosely. And he came and he tightened the knots up, and then he tied her up. And we continued the dialogue along most of this time.
I'm trying to engage him in conversation the whole time. Where you been? What's, where you headed? Trying to ask follow-up questions. I was taking a sociology class, and I thought I might be able to squeeze a paper out of it. While she was tying me up, I mentioned to her that I thought that I could get the gun, that if I was just moved a little bit closer, I could reach over and get it. And she says, oh, no, don't try anything. Well, he stepped back about 2 or 3 feet from that, and I never really had an opportunity again. The odds are, if someone's robbing you, you should cooperate and don't try anything heroics, because you stand a much greater chance of having harm occur. And I felt if I was going to change the odds, I probably at least ought to ask her. And obviously she declined, and I never had the opportunity again. As soon as we were tied, he then said he wanted me to get down and lay on my stomach so that he could tie my feet. And I kind of fussed with him a bit, and I said, it was really cold in the evenings, which really wasn't so much cold. It was just the inconvenience of being stuck out all night. And I said, get down. And he put the gun at me. He tied us up with our feet, then our feet to our hands, so we were essentially hog-tied. And I got the impression we were kind of getting near the end. I mean, there wasn't anything much more he could do. He was going to leave. He was going to take my keys, take whatever money I had there. And I kind of looked around and I said, can you do me a favor? Tell me, was the gun really loaded? I don't know where I'd read it, but I'd read it someplace that people that do robberies didn't want to ever be convicted of shooting somebody, so that on many occasions they would leave the gun unloaded, so if something happened, they wouldn't shoot somebody, and their penalty if they were caught was less. I know that sounds preposterous in this day and age because, I mean, everybody has loaded guns, but that's what I had read, and I asked him, I said, is the gun really loaded? He pulls the gun and pulls out the clip and shows me a full clip, puts it back, sticks it in his holster. And I'm thinking, okay,